Welcome to the 6th episode of the My Vision Born Show on the Abdel Russell Experience podcast. In the previous episode, I went into great detail about my junior high school career and how that experience really opened my eyes to race relations in the United States of America. Please keep in mind, as a second-generation immigrant from the Caribbean, it was a magical experience, and racism wasn't something that I noticed. But then again, I was a child. In my world, especially coming from the Caribbean, where most of the people on the island were black, racism is not something that you think about. It is almost non-existent. So from birth up until 7, if you have not experienced racism, it's not something that stays on your mind. When I arrived here at 7, I was amazed at the music, the clothing, the food, the culture, the different races. It was just a great ride. So entering junior high school in the late 80s, early 90s was a serious eye-opening experience because there was a lot of racial tension back then. Public Enemy released a song that I loved, in particular because of the sound, but I realized that the lyrics within the song was resonating with what I was discovering as far as race relations was concerned. But that's what I went over in the 5th episode of the My Vision Born Show on the Abdel Russell Experience podcast, and now this is episode number 6. In my high school career, this is where I discovered race relations in regards to politics. Needless to say, by default, I was a Democrat. All black people were Democrats back in the days. Obviously, I'm no longer a Democrat. I've matured, I understand how the world works, and I switched parties a long time ago. But getting back to how my high school career had a significant impact on my perspective on race relations in the United States of America, my high school career was just as awesome, if not even more awesome, than my junior high school. I went to James Madison High School in Brooklyn, New York. In my opinion, one of the best high schools in Brooklyn. Shout out to the Golden Knights and all of my fellow classmates that I shared those 4 years with, those great magical 4 years. And a big shout out to my Circle Black crew, the great group of guys that I spent 4 years playing football with, and I ran track with some of them as well. And a special shout out to the boosters, twirlers, and cheerleaders that made those 4 years even more magical. During the first year of my high school career, my mother moved my brother and I to a new neighborhood in Brooklyn, New York called Canarsie. This move, although as great as it was because the neighborhood was absolutely beautiful, and I honestly can't say that it's beautiful anymore, but more on that later. The move was a great move for our family, but I can't say that I was not apprehensive because during this time, I was fresh out of junior high school, fresh out of almost riots breaking out in different places in the city over racial tension, and here it is, we're moving to Canarsie, where a real estate company was just firebombed because that said company was allowing minorities and blacks to buy homes and also rent in the area. One can only imagine what was going through my 14, 15-year-old mind, especially after just going through 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, discovering the real story of racial tension within the city. In my mind, in the back of my head, I was worried about Canarsie, but that worry was quickly put to rest when I made friends with a bunch of other white kids, Asian kids, and black kids as well. It was further put to rest in the local pizza shop across the street from Canarsie High School, where most of the kids from the neighborhood met up to play Street Fighter 2, other arcade games, and buy them a slice of pizza. In fact, the only thing that I remember that closely resembled racism was when I was on a bus and a black bus driver was pulling away as a white guy was trying to make the bus, but unfortunately the white guy missed the bus and he ended up calling the bus driver the N-word. That was the only incident where I witnessed racism. No, I take that back, because racism defined is when one group of people have power over another group of people and they use that power to stop the second group of people from making any kind of progress. That passenger or that guy that was trying to catch the bus did not have any power over the bus driver. He was just a racist. So that was the first time I ever experienced a racist act from a racist. Moving to Canarsie my first year in high school, on top of being fresh out of junior high school where I discovered that racial tensions were high, made me self-examine myself and stop looking at everything that was happening on the outside world. I began to look at myself and realize that I was different. Not different as in, oh, I'm black, but different as in, yeah, I'm black, but I'm also from a different culture of black people coming from the Caribbean. One moment that made me quickly realize this even more was during a conversation I was having with one of my football coaches, and he asked me, Abdel, why are you so damn humble? humble. I thought to myself, I couldn't see my coach asking another one of my teammates that question, and I really thought deeply about what he was asking me. He was asking me why I was so humble because he was used to the other kids, I don't want to say black kids, but the other black kids, having a certain type of character. From birth till 7, while I was on the island, I was not under any kind of pressure. I wasn't aware of any kind of racism, and my parents weren't surrounded by different elements within society that made them feel like other, because the only people that were in the Caribbean were black. They all look like us. We all look like one another. This realization helped me to further define who I was, what I stand for, and how I view things, and how I was going to relate to everybody else that was in my life during my high school career. Now that I look back at that self-realization, I am aware now of why I do not want to be put in a box with anyone that looks like me. Just because we are the same skin color doesn't mean we think the same, and that has been very pronounced in my later adult years when I got really involved into politics and the direction of where this country was going based upon my experience as an immigrant, a second-generation immigrant whose perspective on everything that was happening in this country was vastly different from the other people who look like me who were born in this country. I mean, now that I think about it, my perspective and my experience changed from junior high school, where I gained knowledge of how my schoolmates lived at home when we had conversations, to being in high school, where I'm now hanging out with teammates and classmates who are of different races and different culture, visiting their homes, visiting their neighborhoods, and realizing the actual true identity of the United States of America. America is truly a melting pot, and high school furthered my education in this knowledge by linking up with people, hanging out with people, eating different foods, sleepovers, everything you can think of that can further expose my mind to how other people and other cultures and other races live their lives. And believe it or not, I got the opportunity to visit Bensonhurst. It was not on my wish list, especially coming from junior high school. And if you want to know what I'm talking about, visit episode 5 of the My Vision Born show, and you'll know why this was such a big deal. But a teammate that I played football with lived in Bensonhurst, and I made a trip out there one day just to hang out a bit, and I was mesmerized and blown away because my mind had a certain idea of what that area was like. I always knew it was beautiful, but you know, the race relations when it came to blacks in Bensonhurst was not at the best. But lo and behold, in high school I got my first taste of what Bensonhurst was like, and the only difference between Bensonhurst and Canarsie, where I live, was that it had way more Italians and absolutely no black or brown people. In 2025, Canarsie, Brooklyn is now a shadow of what it was when I lived there in my freshman year of high school. Sometimes I wonder if the fear that the whites had on black and brown people were valid. I'm not saying obviously that it's right. It's kind of a disgusting way to look at things. But after the influx of black and brown people in the neighborhood began to slowly decline. I'm black and I'm saying this, but I'm realizing that sometimes it's not about black and white. It's about a rich mentality or a poor mentality, or about morals and principle. You have white people out there who have no morals and no principles, just like you have black people out there with high morals and high principles. And I just think the people that flooded Canarsie, whether they look like me or not, did not have the same way of thinking that maybe I'd say my family does, or some other group of people might, because it's all about how you view where you live. Do you respect it or do you not? And that's the difference sometimes. It has less to do with skin color and more to do with how people think. My senior year is when I also discovered that I was basically behind the 8 ball as far as what my college education or my future after high school would look like. My senior year was when the bells began to ring, and I realized that the 4 years that I spent in high school was basically just me attending and doing what I had to do, when it should have been me preparing for the next 4 years of my life after high school. I realized that certain groups of people, certain students, already had their following 4 years all planned out, and that was due to their moms and their dads coming together and making sure that their freshman year, sophomore year, and junior year was all planned out in anticipation for their final year of high school. During the 4 years of my high school career, my mother was preoccupied with working a full-time job while hustling on the weekends on Eastern Parkway in Brooklyn, New York, just so she can keep a roof over our heads and food in our home. To top that off, I forgot to keep in mind that that my mother basically spent all her adult life back home on the island, and she was basically still in a new country. As an immigrant new to this country, I had to put things in perspective for my mother as well, because she was also new to this country, and she had absolutely no idea of what her son should be doing during the 4 years of high school other than being respectful, showing up on time, and graduating. It was moments like these and my high school graduation that helped me to really look at my life from a higher perspective. I now realized that it was not just me who was adjusting to a new country. I realized that my mother must have had a hard lesson in the realities that came with being an immigrant to a new country, especially when your entire life you spent in a different country. During my high school graduation, I saw plenty of moms, plenty of dads, plenty of aunts, plenty of uncles show up for some of my friends. On my side, it was just my mother. That's all I really needed, but it was these key moments that helped me realize that my experience in this country was also being shaped by my mother, who was a new immigrant to this country, learning the ropes and what to do, especially as a single parent. This made me look at my mother in a totally different light. I always loved and respected my mother, but understanding the challenges that she was facing as a single parent, raising two young black boys in Brooklyn, New York during the late 80s and early 90s, oh my God, I can't even begin to tell you. The appreciation level is multiplied tenfold. My life and reflecting on the experience of my mother as well is what may have shaped my worldview of the United States of America. I put things in perspective and try to figure out how in the world did my mother manage to do that. She was at one point going to school and working 2 jobs, and also at one point hustling on the weekends, selling clothes on Eastern Parkway just to take care of her 2 boys. There shouldn't be anyone in this country that complains about how hard it is, because if my mother could do it, anyone can do it. It all just depends on your outlook and your perspective. Is the glass half full or is the glass half empty? And I also realize that what has shaped me into who I am politically right now. My political philosophy is simple. Do not give me a fish. Teach me how to fish, and I'll be able to feed myself for the rest of my life. Heck, forget about even teaching me. Just show me the lake. I got it from there. My current views as a grown man is in stark contrast to what I was surrounded by in Brooklyn, New York while I was growing up. Most of the kids my age and who looked like me were all on the same page with how they felt about authorities such as the police. They were all terrified of the police or talked very bad about them, and all Republicans were racist. My God, I look back now on my life and what I was surrounded by, and I laugh because it's so far from reality and how the world really works in the United States of America. But hey, that's my opinion and that's my perspective, and you tuned into the 6th episode of the My Vision Born Show on the Abdel Russell Experience podcast. I thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you found something of value from this current episode. You are blessed and enjoy your freedoms. Peace.